everybody. Welcome to Monday Morning Must-Knows. My name is Merlin Rothfeld, and here are several things to pay attention to for the upcoming trading week. Now, as always, I'm going to start off with a quick little review of what happened last week. Talk about a wild ending. It was almost like the Kentucky Derby. It was a fun race during the week, and all of a sudden, at the very last minute, you're standing up going, yes, yes, yes. What am I talking about? Well, first off, let's go back to some of the highlights for the week, or lowlights as they may be. You had Kohl's and Salesforce with really bad earnings and huge gap downs. You had good earnings from Costco. Then you had Friday. And Friday was that core PCE price index number, which of course is the benchmark that the Fed is looking at to help establish rates long term, looking at the inflation levels of the United States. Expectations were we're going to come out at 0.3%. We came out at 0.2%. Now, on face value here, that would imply that the Fed now has free rein to cut rates going forward. What did you think was going to happen? Markets should have shot straight up and really had a booming day. All of a sudden, NASDAQ, S&P just getting crushed, just down the first half of the trading session. Looked apocalyptic, like it was going to be the beginning of the end. You're like, why is this happening? It doesn't make sense. And then all of a sudden, we came screaming back up. S&P closing almost unchanged on the, or actually S&P was up on the day, and the NASDAQ closing almost unchanged. So huge market rallies there. Well, is this week going to be as exciting as that one? That I don't know. I can't tell you. But what I can say is we have a lot of companies reporting earnings. So let's dive into our earnings calendar. We have 428 companies reporting this week. There is nothing on Monday. Tuesday does bring some familiar names like CrowdStrike and Hewlett-Packard. Wednesday gets a bit more exciting with Lululemon, Dollar Tree, Campbell Soup, and of course GameStop. Now GameStop is of interest because Roaring Kitty just came back online after 2 years, almost 3 years of hibernation, if you will. Who's Roaring Kitty? He was kind of the one that spearheaded the whole move of these short squeeze in GameStop and that meme coin rally of AMC, GameStop, and several others. Now, when he tweeted out a few weeks back, GameStop surged, AMC surged, and a lot of these meme stocks revitalized their jubilation that Roaring Kitty was back. And then all of a sudden, he went silent and the stocks fell again. So I don't know if it's necessarily going to be something groundbreaking with regards to their earnings, but we do know that GameStop comes out with earnings, so pay attention to that one. It will probably add a lot of volatility to GameStop. And finally, Thursday, we have a few announcements. You can see DocuSign, JM Smuckers, NEO, and Sienna. Friday is nothing. We've got nothing going on Friday, so we'll just skip that one and not worry about it. Now, as we're seeing inflation decline here in the United States, the question becomes, is Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve going to lower rates? There's a lot of speculation on that. I am in the camp of one rate cut by the end of the year, purely as a political move. Now, my opinion doesn't really matter, right? It's where we put our money. How are we going to act on this information and the data that's in front of us? Nothing happening for the U.S. this week, but I can tell you we have some central bank announcements from our neighbors to the north. There are two announcements, actually. We'll start things off with the Bank of Canada. Now, right now, they are at 5%, and they have been at 5% for the past 7 meetings. It's been a while since they raised or lowered. Now, the expectation for Wednesday at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time is that the Bank of Canada, drum roll please, is going to lower rates. This is something I think the markets are excited about because when you lower rates, that stimulates the economy. It's growth. So this could be a good sign for the Canadian markets. And right now, that is just the expectation. We'll have to wait and see if that number actually comes out on Wednesday, showing a 25 basis point cut. Now, will the Europeans follow suit? We'll find out shortly after that. On Thursday at 8:15 a.m., the European Central Bank will report, and they are right now at 4.5%. They have been at 4.5% for the past 6 meetings, so it's been a while. And they're expected to drop their rates as well by 25 basis points. So this is an interesting thing. It's that keep up with the Joneses world. Most international central banks are following what the U.S. is doing, but we haven't lowered. We're not lowering yet. Now, our FOMC meeting is in a couple of weeks, and who knows? We may get a surprise lower at that meeting, but right now expectations are about 90%, 95% that we're going to keep rates right where they're at for the short term, and certainly Jerome Powell has backed that up with some of his talk track. So that is your probably the biggest announcements, particularly if you are trading the Canadian dollar or the euro. Expect to see some significant volatility when those announcements come out, so be very careful. And finally, we've got quite a few announcements with regards to the U.S. markets from a employment numbers data. Now, there are 5 pieces of employment data coming out this week. Maybe it's 4. I think it's 5, but I'll run through it as we go here. These announcements definitely don't carry the same weight. The big announcements will be happening on Friday, but we'll start things off on Tuesday with the JOLTS job openings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. That's followed up on Wednesday at 8:15 a.m. by the ADP non-farm employment change. That's the second most important one for the week. We move on to Thursday with your normal unemployment claims at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And finally, the last two, the unemployment rate and non-farm employment change, will be happening Friday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. At this moment of recording this video, the expectations were that we are going to stay at 3.9% for the unemployment rate. Now, is that relatively high or low? Well, I'm a big fan of trends and understanding the way that things are moving. So let's take a look at the unemployment rate chart just to give you an idea of how things have been progressing. Now, this goes back into mid-2021. And you can see that in mid-2023, in the center of your screen there, we got really low, down to like 3.2, maybe 3.1% for the unemployment rate. But we have seen over the past year or so, the unemployment rate is slowly increasing. Now, it's a bit deceptive here. I'm not trying to clickbait or create a false illusion. We have seen it come off the lows from 2023, but the reality is for the past, let's say, 8 months, unemployment's been stuck below 3.9%, and that is a very low historical number. So when you hear about Jerome Powell talking about the unemployment rate in the United States, obviously he's referring to this, and it's not high. Remember, the Fed has two mandates, a dual mandate. Number one is full employment, which clearly we are at, and the other one is for stable pricing, which is inflation. They're trying to fix that one. So out of those two things, the Fed does not need to worry about this unemployment rate. All looks good for now. Now, I make the argument that if we get to 4.5%, this will become a bigger talk track for our elected officials on how high unemployment is. But for right now, this is a non-factor. Even if we see the unemployment rate jump to, let's say, 4%, ticks up just a little bit at next Friday's reading, probably not going to have that big of an impact on the markets because right now it's all about inflation. So you've got two major central bank announcements. That's the Bank of Canada and the European Central Bank. A few decent earnings out there for some volatility to your portfolio. And of course, the employment numbers for the United States, making it a pretty interesting week, particularly on Friday with your unemployment rate. That, my friends, is your Monday Morning Must-Knows. We'll see you next week.